So the real question right now is this: is a supply shock for XRP even possible? Because lately there has been a lot of discussion around this topic, with some people saying that a supply shock is absolutely inevitable due to the amount of XRP that could be absorbed by ETFs, while others are saying that a supply shock doesn't even make sense and can't realistically happen for XRP at all. In this video, I want to take a realistic and grounded approach by explaining what a supply shock actually means, how realistic it truly is for XRP, and also talk about XRP's current price action, because we've just broken above some very important levels, and this is definitely something you want to be paying attention to. As always, your support means a lot to this channel, so thank you to everyone who takes the time to like these videos and subscribe, because those two simple actions genuinely help more than most people realize. And if you ever plan on buying XRP, make sure to check out my favorite platform, Uphold, which is linked down in the description. Now, before getting fully into the supply shock discussion, I want to touch on something slightly off topic, but very relevant, because in yesterday's video, I talked about how crypto gurus constantly assign random valuations to blockchains using metrics that don't always make sense. And now the newest metric being thrown around is TVL. People are claiming that XRP is massively overvalued because its market cap is much higher in proportion to its TVL compared to other chains. And honestly, this might be one of the most flawed metrics I've seen, because there's a clear reason why Bitcoin is never included in these charts, and that's because Bitcoin completely breaks the argument. Bitcoin has zero TVL, and yet it is the highest market cap cryptocurrency in the entire market, which alone shows how unreliable this metric really is. And what you'll continue to see is people constantly making up new reasons to justify why certain cryptocurrencies are undervalued while others are overvalued. The truth is, you can't say a blockchain should be worth more just because it has higher TVL, and you also can't say it should be worth more just because it has more transactions, because I could lock billions of dollars in TVL on a chain. And if that TVL just sits there doing nothing, it means absolutely nothing. The same goes for transactions, because I could generate billions of transactions, but if they're all spam and not providing real value, they don't matter at all, which is why you really have to be careful who you listen to in this space. The narrative I constantly see is that someone launches a new chain, throws out a bunch of flashy but meaningless metrics, and then claims that this new chain is going to be the next XRP killer. But in all my years in crypto, I've never seen anything come close, and the reason is very simple. It doesn't matter how advanced a chain claims to be or how impressive the technology sounds, because what truly matters is having a proven track record, real-world usage, the ability to work with financial institutions, and deep liquidity across multiple corridors, and these are things that take years to build. It's not always about having the highest TPS or the largest TVL, because all of these factors need to be looked at together rather than in isolation. And people often message me saying things like, this chain can do 1 billion TPS, but if no one is actually using it, it doesn't really matter. Now, moving back to the supply shock discussion, because this is where a lot of confusion exists, one of the most obvious things happening right now is that a large amount of XRP is leaving exchanges, and many people believe this is being driven by ETF-related demand. There's a chart from Glassnode that's been circulating, which shows XRP leaving exchanges in significant amounts. And while some people are extremely bullish about this, saying that less supply and more demand automatically means higher prices, others point out that Glassnode doesn't track every single exchange. That's true, but if Glassnode is tracking 10 to 15 major exchanges and all of them are showing the same trend, it's not unreasonable to assume that exchanges not reporting data are likely experiencing something similar. In my opinion, what's really happening is that the market dipped, people saw an opportunity, they bought XRP on exchanges, and then moved it off because they want to hold long-term and keep their crypto secure, which to me is fairly obvious behavior. So what does this actually have to do with a supply shock, and what even is a supply shock in the context of XRP? First, will there ever be a point where you literally can't buy XRP at all? No, I don't believe that will ever happen. and I think XRP will always be available to purchase. But will XRP always be available at today's prices? That's a completely different question, because what makes XRP unique is that its price itself creates new supply. At lower prices, most people are not willing to sell their XRP. But as the price rises, new supply gets unlocked because people become more willing to take profits. And while many of you watching this video wouldn't sell at current prices, some of you would absolutely consider selling at $200, which is new supply entering the market. So when I talk about a supply shock, I'm not talking about XRP disappearing or becoming unavailable. I'm talking about demand increasing faster than people are willing to sell at current prices, especially now that ETFs are opening brand new corridors for demand that didn't exist before. That new demand chews through available supply at lower price levels. And the only way for the market to respond is for XRP to revalue itself at a higher price, which to me isn't speculation, it's simply how markets work. A supply shock doesn't mean there's no XRP left. It means supply that was previously declining at a steady pace is now declining much faster due to multiple new demand vectors entering the market. I like to think of it like a dam or a balloon where one small hole causes water to leak out slowly, but if you suddenly add many more holes, the water flows out much faster, and the only way to slow that down is to change the pressure, which in markets means price. What's especially interesting about XRP is the mindset of the community, because many XRP holders genuinely believe in much higher future valuations, and even at prices like $100 or $150, a lot of them still aren't willing to sell. That creates an unusual situation compared to most other crypto communities, where people are often just looking to make a quick profit and exit, whereas many XRP holders want to see the full long-term vision play out. It reminds me of people who sold Amazon stock early on, because while they made quick money, they missed the bigger picture of what Amazon eventually became, and that long-term belief is what creates sustained supply pressure. Will there always be some supply available? Yes, because there will always be someone whose life changes at $20, $50, or $100, and they'll be willing to sell. But when a large portion of the community refuses to sell and demand continues to increase, price has no choice but to adjust upward. That, in my opinion, is what a supply shock really is, and while there's no official definition or checklist, it's mostly just common sense when you look at supply and demand dynamics. Now, if we look at the XRP to Bitcoin ratio, this is actually very exciting, because XRP has been consolidating in this range since late 2024 and early 2025, forming a very clear and structured pattern that looks like it's coiling up for a potential breakout. We might still see some sideways movement or even a final pullback, but overall, this structure is extremely bullish, and if we zoom out further, XRP has a lot of room to move higher relative to Bitcoin. We've done some rough math before, and if Bitcoin were to reach around $250,000 and XRP simply returned to its historical ratio levels, that would put XRP somewhere in the $40 to $50 range, which honestly isn't unrealistic at all. A $250,000 Bitcoin within the next year or so is very possible, and XRP doesn't need to do anything extraordinary, it just needs to regain relative strength. Looking at the USD chart, XRP has also just broken out of a long-term downtrend that it's been stuck in for a very long time, and as long as we don't see a sharp move back down with a daily close below that trend line, this looks like a genuine breakout. When you zoom out to the weekly time frame and look at where $40 to $50 XRP actually sits historically, it doesn't look extreme at all, especially considering that XRP has made much larger moves in the past. So when you combine increasing demand, limited willingness to sell, ETF inflows, and improving technical structure, it becomes clear why price may need to move significantly higher just to unlock supply. There hasn't even been a major ETF outflow day yet, so supply has to come from somewhere, and eventually higher prices are the only way to make that happen. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this update, and I'll see you in the next one.